Welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I am your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. I've also been a varsity basketball coach of a very successful program in northern Michigan. Currently, my daughter and I are coaching one of the best AAU teams in the country. Got a lot to talk about, Piston fans. We're going to get into some intel and league sources. We're going to talk about Cam Whitmore possibly signing with the Pistons, or he's known to be a prominent target for the Pistons. We're also going to talk about intel from the Pistons workouts. They worked out at least the five guys, the Thompson twins, Cam Whitmore, and Taylor Hendricks, and Jarris Walker. I'm not sure who else say it, but we know they've at least worked out those guys, and there's some reports sneaking out from some of those workouts. We're also going to talk about the Pistons lottery luck. Piston fans thinks we have the worst lottery luck, but we're going to talk about 2003 when we got lucky to get unlucky. But anyway, we're going to start out with Cam Johnson. So Cam Johnson is 27 years old. He's 6'8". He was the 11th pick in the draft the year he came out of North Carolina. And we all know Cam Johnson is a restricted free agent. So no matter who tries to sign him, the Nets can match that offer. So it's real tricky there, but we know that Cam was a real good player. He would fit just what we need. He's shot 47% from the floor, 40% on threes, averaged 15.5 points last year, 2 assists, 4.4 rebounds. And according to Mark Stein, who is an NBA insider, league sources say Cam Johnson is a prominent and rising on Detroit's list of free agent targets. Naturally, he has a huge new fan in Motown after the Pistons' hiring of Monty Williams as their coach. So Monty said the only time he's ever cried after a trade was after they traded Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges to the Nets for Kevin Durant. So obviously he has this deep love for those two players and for Cam. So it's not a coincidence, I don't think, that Monty, after, a lot of Piston fans wanted Cam Johnson for us to sign him. I didn't think that it was necessarily the right time exactly to do that. A player like him might be better to sign next year. But then the fact that Monty got hired, I think would make him have more of a desire to come to Detroit, and would make, Monty has all the intel in the world. He was in the locker room. He was at practice every day. He coached them for all those years. And so I think it's no coincidence that the Pistons, that he's been rising in prominence for the Pistons to sign. So here's what can happen. A lot of teams are going to want him. And not a lot of teams have cap space. Houston has more cap space than we do, and I think so does San Antonio. But we could offer everything that we have to him. And the thing about it is we need to try to make it so that we have to overpay him, essentially. But he would have to give him a contract that the Nets would not want to match. And so there's other ways you can do it. And my thing, and I'm not an executive, and I don't, run the franchise, but I'm curious if we could offer him like $30 million the first year. And there's a lot of players that have declining salaries where they make less and less each year. So we can sign him for 4 years. And so I think that if we offered him a front-loaded contract, that would be maybe even give us a good chance. And sometimes you can even put different clauses, or you can work the contract differently so it can make it even harder for the other team to want to match it. And the other thing is, I think that there's a chance that they could say they're going to match it, but they would agree to a sign and trade. So that's not out of the realm of possibilities. Of course, I would never trade the 5th pick for that, but I would trade 31 and Bojan or somebody else who they might want. So there's, some reports that Boston Celtics are interested in beef stew, and so we don't know if that, I don't really foresee anybody on their team, and they don't have many draft picks. They traded away a draft pick to get Brogdon recently, so I'm not sure that who they have on their roster that would even interest me. So I'm not sure that trade, but, if we traded some of our assets, if we traded, who knows if they would be interested in Bagley or Weissman or Bojan or Burks. Those are good players, and Bojan and Burks are on really good contracts. The other guys aren't high in money either. So it's possible that we do a sign and trade. We could throw in the 31st pick, and if they were going to match and they wanted to do that, that would be interesting. And I think that Cam could even choose us over other teams, so it's certainly possible that he would want to come to Detroit to play for Monty again, because my guess is that he loved having Monty play, so Monty coach him. So I just can picture this, man. I can picture having Cade and Ivy and Duran and Cam Whitmore and Cameron Johnson for our starting lineup. That would be exciting. That team would really fit well together. I think it would just be tremendous. I keep on beating the drum for my boy Cam Whitmore. Sam Vecini, who's a really highly respected draft guru, he has Cam number 3 on his big board. So, that's other people have him 4, and I think his average probably is about 5. I know people have him 6, 7, 8. Some people have him, different spots, but he's the player I really want. And I just going to reiterate what I've said on a previous podcast, that you look where he's 18, and that's, there's no guarantee how much he's going to improve. But if Brandon Miller were 18, he's 20. Where would he be drafted the year that he was 18? He wouldn't have been drafted this high. And here we have Cam Whitmore that's being considered for the 5th pick, and he is only 18. The Thompson twins are 20. Where would they be drafted when they were 18? Not in the lottery. Jaden Ivey, I'm not sure that I doubt he would have gone in the lottery when he was a freshman after his freshman year of college. And same with Keegan Murray and Benedict Mathurin. Those guys took a big jump. And so I think that is a real thing, that there's a really great chance that he is going to improve. And those things I talked before about feel for the game, people are concerned about his passing, but a lot of those guys significantly even doubled their assist numbers from their freshman year to their sophomore year. So we're going to talk really quick a little bit about upside versus in fit. And so there's people that always are saying, this guy doesn't fit. So with the Thompson twins, Amen Thompson especially, he's a point guard, and Ausar Thompson, a lot of people think should be a point guard. So they are really talented. They are gifted athletes, and they can really pass the ball and see the floor. They have a huge upside defensively, but we have 2 point guards. We are really blessed. I mean, Ivy proved last year that he had 12 assists, 13 assists. He was in the end of last year, he was dishing out assists all over the place. So he could be point guard, but we want the ball in Cade's hands. So to bring in a third guy who can't shoot, and so that doesn't fit. So if you got 2 guys like Cam Whitmore and Ausar Thompson, and you have to, you could say take the best player available. What's the best player available depends on the team. There's got to be some consideration for how they fit. It has to be part of being the best player available. So Amen Thompson isn't the best player available for the Pistons because he needs to play the point, where Cam Whitmore plays the wing. He's a cutter. He's a slasher. He's great at catching and shooting. And so he's a better fit, but he's the best player available because he's better for the Pistons. So I understand what they say about upside. And again, same thing with Scoot. So Scoot Henderson, there's this big debate about whether he's going to be second or third. And I'm scared to think about, if I ever passed up on him and had a chance to draft him, I would be scared because I really think he could be unbelievable. And I guess he dominated. He blew everybody away in his workout in Charlotte. But if Scoot were 6'4" and shot 32% on threes, I would take him over anybody except for Victor, no matter what, even if we had 2 great point guards. And it's the same thing with the Thompson twins. I'm scared that if I passed on Amen Thompson and ended up taking somebody else, I'm afraid that he might end up being, all NBA. And so that really could happen. But I also, he can't shoot. So if he could shoot just even a little bit, and like I said before, the fact that they're 20 years old and they've been worked with a lot and they still can't shoot doesn't mean that they're not going to shoot. Doesn't mean that they're not going to put in the work, and somewhere the light switch is going to flick on and they're going to be good shooters someday. But there's just a lot more doubt in it. And since we don't need another point guard, the fact that they can't shoot and the fact that we don't need a point guard means I wouldn't take it. But if Thompson could shoot 32% on threes instead of 25, like he shot against weak competition when he's left wide open, then I'm not going to risk it. So that's just things, fit versus upside. I think that sometimes they kind of come together. So interesting, there was a mock draft at The Athletic, and the writers from different teams that they covered did the picks for different teams. And so James Edwards III, who is a Piston beat writer for The Athletic, he picked Cam Whitmore, and it was based on intel. So intel is, people love to talk, and I can tell you there's lots of things get leaked, and a lot of people will speak. They just love to spread stuff and love to feel important by spreading stuff. I guess you got to give Orlando lots of credit. Nobody last year thought that Orlando was picking Pablo Banchero. Nobody saw that coming. People thought that Jabari Smith Jr. was going to get picked first, and I don't even know if they even worked Banchero out, but they knew all along that that's who they were going to pick. So sometimes things don't leak, but obviously James Edwards has lots of connections. He's around all the Piston people. He knows the coaches. He knows the people at work, and maybe even a secretary or somebody that's an assistant general manager or something, and somebody just says something and it slips out anyway. So he picked Cam Whitmore, and it was partially based on, I think, intel that he had, and partway Monty wants to run an open offense, which I think that he felt like Cam Whitmore fit that open offense where it's free-flowing and lots of movement and you're spread out, and so there's room for him to drive and room for him to cut. He's one of the best cutters in the draft, and when you got Cade Cunningham and Duran and Ivy, they're really great at feeding cutters. Pistons didn't have very many good cutters, but when somebody cut, those guys made some great passes to them last year. So, it'll be interesting about that, but again, the workouts, the Pistons worked out all those guys, and a couple things that leaked out were that NBA sources said the Piston coaches and executives were impressed with Hendricks, especially his shooting. And so I think Hendricks has the highest floor out of anybody that's, the Pistons could draft, just because he is 6'9", can block shots, great on defense, real mobile, and he has a high release, but he's a, amazing shooter. He's not just a good shooter, he's a great shooter. And he's smooth, high release, and can make contested threes. So he is, I think, the safest pick. But anyway, that's what came out from executives and coaches. He heard from both of them that they really were impressed with Hendricks. Some people I've heard talk about the workouts, and they say, oh yeah, they worked him out, but they would never consider him at 5. And I don't agree with that. I think that they would consider him at 5 if Cam Johnson were to go to the Rockets at 4. Cam Whitmore were to go to the Rockets at 4. So they also said that Ausar had some big supporters in the Piston front office, Ausar Thompson. So again, I don't like the fit there. I think he could be a truly great player, but I just don't think that he's a fit there. So we'll see what happens with that. The trick to the draft is trading back. So if Cam were to get picked 4th by the Rockets and the Pistons knew somebody that really wanted Amen Thompson and was willing to give us a bunch of picks and stuff, do we trade back? But if we have somebody that we really want, like Taylor Hendricks, he might not be there. So that's the same thing with all these guys. So I know that the Pelicans are interested in getting Scoot Henderson, but Charlotte might not want to trade the pick, but maybe Portland would be willing to even trade Zion Williamson for that pick. Well, you have to wait until the draft, because if Scoot were to get picked 2nd, and then then he wouldn't be there at 3rd. So the Pelicans I don't think are interested in Brandon Miller, so they wouldn't make that trade. And same with the Pistons, though. But my fear is if the Pistons want to trade back even like to 7 or 8, and you're just banking on Taylor Hendricks being there at 7 or 8, Orlando could take him at 6. So, I mean, I certainly would trade back if Cam wasn't there and didn't have my heart set on Cam Whitmore, and he got picked 4th, and Orlando wanted to trade us 6 and 11, and we could trade them 5 and 31 and something else if they need it thrown in. I would consider doing that for sure, because I'm not sure that, I think that even Taylor Hendricks is a safer pick than Cam Whitmore. I think Cam Whitmore has more upside. So it's real interesting about these workouts, though. Some people put a lot of stock in them because it's the last time that you saw them, and they really have impressed people at the workouts. But anybody can have a good workout. So I remember, we'll talk about this later too, Darko Milicic, the Pistons drafted, is considered one of the greatest busts of all time. He blew everybody away with his workout. I think that almost any team in the NBA would have taken him after seeing him work out. So, but I just remember, I think that Jalen Green, there was leaks out of the workout from when Jalen Green worked out and Cade worked out. And I think Cade had a bad workout and Jalen Green had a great workout. And so they were considering right up until the last day who they were going to take. And I'm glad they took Cade. Same thing with Mathurin and Ivy. I think Mathurin just, they surprised everybody. His competitiveness, his competitive spirit, and how tough he played, and he was really great. And again, I wanted Mathurin over Ivy. I wanted Shaden Sharp over both of them, but then I wouldn't trade. If they wanted to trade Ivy for Mathurin, I would not trade Ivy. That's for sure. So I talked a little bit about beef stew a little bit, and I talked last episode about the trade to the Mavericks for Bogey, and the 31 pick for the Mavericks 10th pick, and also to throw in Tim Hardaway Jr. So I don't think they might not want to do that. I'd be curious what happened if we did throw in beef stew or Bagley or Weissman. I'm not sure if they would take any of those guys, and what would have to be included to make that trade work. I love Beef Stew. Beef Stew is, everybody thinks we'll never trade him because he's Troy's favorite player and he's everything we want our Pistons to be about. The only problem is he can't jump, and he's not shown for sure to be a good three-point shooter. That I'm hoping that happens this year. I hope we keep him, and I hope he makes threes, and because he can't finish good inside consistently, but he plays his tail off. He's a good defender. He's great at switching. He has a lot to offer our team, but his spirit, his fight, his determination, his work ethic they're priceless too. So but what I've always seen him as a player that you want if we're going to be a playoff team, I see him coming off the bench and not starting. So he could end up starting this year, but by the time we're good, I don't see him being good enough to be on a starting team. And I guess if he starts shooting 40% on threes, that could change. That's for sure. So there's some speculation about Jordan Poole, that went to Michigan, and he signed a big contract with the Warriors, and some people speculated, and I think Sam Vecini even said the Pistons should get him. Well, we have kind of enough guards, but I'm going to tell you there's this thing in sports and in the stock market is to buy low and sell high. And right now, Poole had a disappointing year by a lot of people's guesstimation, but he is very gifted. I think that he played around those Warriors so much that he watched Steph take all these wild shots, and so he thought he could take them too. And I think if he just got reined back a little bit and had better shot selection, that he would be effective. We're not really in need of a guard, but I think that's the time. They need to unload his contract, and the fact that he was disappointing, I think, would give us an opportunity to buy him lower, because they just really need to get their books straight if they want to sign Draymond and Clay, which I'm not sure that I would want to. I think that they've seen their best days, and they demand so much money, and Poole is so young still, and he has loads of talent. And again, we talked about Kuminga possibly getting thrown in, but it's fascinating, all the trades that are going to come up. We heard about Zion possibly getting traded, and Zion he is a freak of nature, and he is so good. And the 1 year he played, he averaged 27 points and shot like 70%. It was like historical efficiency, and he's not even that tall. I mean, he's 6'6" at the most, but he is so gifted. But again, it's just like the reason I didn't want us to get Blake. Well, there's a couple reasons, but he was always injured, and that proved he had one healthy year out of. We paid him, I think, 4 years, gazillions of dollars, and he played 1 year basically that he was healthy. So, but if I would trade that, I would make that trade if I were Portland. If they're, of course I wouldn't keep Damian Lillard. I've said that before because they need to. They're in a perfect position to rebuild. They have the 3rd pick. They have Anthony Simons and they have Shaedon Sharpe, and they have the 23rd pick. And if they traded Damian Lillard, they could get a boatload. They could hopefully get draft picks and some maybe more young pieces, and they would have a great start to their rebuild. Way easier than what the Pistons. I mean, again, you might not love Troy, but he started from the negative. We started from the negative. We had no assets to trade, no good draft picks to start out with, no extra picks by trading away a star, and so they have the perfect setup, man, for a rebuild. But anyway, we're going to talk about Pistons' luck in the lottery, and again, this was crushing. It crushed my soul when we dropped to the 5th pick, and we've had bad luck in other lotteries. But again, we did get Cade. We got the number 1 pick 1 year, and so it was tremendous. And I have so much belief in Cade and not only his talent but his leadership and what he means to a team. I don't even know if we would have got Jarrett Jack if you could see Cade. Cade just is magical with people. He could just go up. You see him after every game. He's always talking. The other team stars, people are just attracted to him. But anyway, in 2003, the Pistons the Grizzlies made a stupid trade. They were not any good, and they traded for Otis Thorpe. He was a rugged, tough, really good power forward. He could shoot the 12-foot jumper. He rebounded tough. He was at least 6'10". He was real physical, but they traded their first-round pick to the Pistons for Otis Thorpe. So, but it was protected. Now teams have way more protections, but back then they had it protected for only if they were to get the first pick, would they get to keep their pick. So anyway, the Grizzlies, they finished with the 6th worst record, and they would have been the 6th pick, but they had a lottery back then. They had better odds. The front-loaded teams had better odds back then, but there were 5 teams that had better chances of getting the first pick than they did. So anyway, they only had a 6% chance of moving up in the lottery. And what happens? They get the number 2 pick. So how lucky were the Pistons? It wasn't even their pick. Somebody traded them for a good player, but not great. And here we already had a championship team, and we were going to get the number 2 pick. And most experts thought LeBron James went number 1, and most experts thought that Darko Milicic was the second best player in the draft. I'm going to tell you, most general managers would have taken him. Everybody in hindsight now talks about, how that was the worst pick in the history, and it may have been, but because after he was picked, Carmelo Anthony was picked, and I wasn't so thrilled about Carmelo. He was great. Syracuse won the national championship when he was a freshman, and he came out after his freshman year, but he was kind of pudgy, and he could really shoot, he could really play, but he was a little bit heavy. He slimmed way down in the NBA, but he got picked 3rd. And then Chris Bosh, who was a really good player. He was long and lanky and could rebound and shoot, and block shots, but he was picked 4th. And he improved throughout his NBA career. And then the 5th pick was Dwayne Wade, who was a senior, and he ended up obviously blowing everybody away and being one of the best players of all time. So anyway, we feel bad about our lottery luck, but in 2003 and in 2021, we got really lucky. And so, like I said, the things changed in the NBA. Like I said with Andre Drummond, post players, when he first was drafted, they were still valued, big guys that could rebound and score inside, and it's changed so drastically just during his career. It really has changed immensely. But back when Darko played, all the big guys were supposed to sit down with their back to the basket, down on the block, and pound the ball inside to them. And so Darko comes over in Europe, a lot of the big guys always played facing the basket, and they were all, Darko could dribble between his legs behind his back. He could shoot the three, but Larry would not let him go out there. Larry would not let him even go past the three-point line. So he suffered emotionally. Here's this young kid coming over from a different country, and he's all of a sudden told to play, and he's on this championship team, so he doesn't get any minutes. They said he was the walking cigar, lucky cigar or something, that when he got in the game, it was because it was a blowout. And so that's when he got to play. So his confidence was shaken. By the time, if he were entering the league today, if he was a prospect today and he could do what he did, he would be valued and he would be a higher pick and he would be, I think, considered a lot better player in the NBA today. So anyway, the draft is next Thursday. It's coming up. It's getting closer and closer, and we're going to have more talk about the draft. But thank you for listening, and I appreciate your support. Please subscribe and like this on YouTube. Do something nice for somebody today, and go Pistons.